It's Doctor Who night on Grant 24678. It does seem that way, doesn't it? I've already made one video about Doctor Who tonight, and this is the second. Right, I've got a short amount of time to name as many Doctor Who monsters as I can. Go! Axon, Auton, Daleks, Cybermen, Sontarans, Ice Warriors, Quarks, Crotons, the Master, Magnus Grill, the Peking Homunculus, Sharish Jek, Yeti, the Mandrels Naimon, the Time Meddler, the Rani, the Master, and the Drashik, giant maggots, giant spiders, giant insects, big fly. There we go. So there we go. In this video, we'll be talking about Skaro, a fascinating planet, 2 wars, and the big one, the Time War. So let's talk about it. If I had the option, I would definitely move to Skaro because it's such an interesting planet. Yes, there is a war going on, but it's not in your face. The war's not in your face, things survive, and there's all these strange plants and strange life forms. I wouldn't live in the time when the Daleks were there, but I'd live in it before the Daleks arrived, just before Davros arrives. And I'd obviously be in a very posh house, being rich. If you're poor, it doesn't really work, but if you're rich, yes, you live in a nice posh house on Skaro, yes. What I find interesting about Skaro is that we get to see loads of different periods of history of Skaro. Genesis of the Daleks, we see the sort of start of Skaro, really, but it's not really the start, because the start starts way back in a audio adventure called Innocence, which is really Davros as a child. Now, you may not want to watch that, you may not want to watch it, but it is actually a fantastic story. I think most people are offended by the fact that Davros has a mother, a father, and a sister. But really, Davros isn't too far from a human, The people of Skaro, of course they had mothers and fathers, yes, of course. And so, Davros has one of these. Davros was he didn't start off as a mutation, he must have gone somewhere to get there. So, Davros was a small boy, who, was very evil. Of course he's evil. He chucks his teacher into a radiation chamber and kills him. And in the next story, his teacher comes back and he's sort of like, I'm clinging on to life just so I can destroy you, or something like that. So, Davros, as a child, yes, he's still extremely evil. But he only gets evil because he's interested in science, which goes a bit too far. I mean, he's interested in life forms willingly giving up their life so that he can experiment on them. So I do like Davros in Innocence. I mean, it's not just Rory Jennings as Davros, but it's that whole feel. You get to see what Skaro's like in a different point of view. I mean, I like the early scenes in Genesis of the Daleks when we get to see the planet. It's misty. People are getting shot. There is a war on, and that's what, Genesis of the Daleks starts off as. We see the War of the Thals. It's very interesting. But it doesn't always make sense, Skaro, because in the first Dalek story, the Daleks seem to be rather different. Because if you think about it, Genesis of the Daleks happened before the Daleks, really, because, Davros created the Daleks, and then they were in a city later on. So in the timeline, Genesis comes first, then the Daleks, probably, or not. It's weird though, because what about the Dalek invasion of Earth? Now, that doesn't fit in anywhere, does it? Because the Daleks have now got these plates on their back, and, they can't actually walk on metal or anything like that, or something like that. And that's the same in the Daleks. So you kind of think, well, that's the early versions of the Daleks. They've just come from Skaro, and they're on this city, and of course Skaro changes dramatically, because there used to be this city, and the city, but of course in real life, of course, this is because they wrote the Daleks first, and then they wrote Genesis, but it doesn't really make sense because Skaro, there's this sort of city, and the neutron bomb and all that sort of stuff, all that bit of the history really doesn't make sense at all. So, the Carleds have completely gone by the time we get to the episode The Daleks. And they're really just Daleks now. And then the Thals and the Daleks are fighting, so they've started the second war. The first war was with the Thals and the Carleds. The second war is... In fact, there must have been about 4 wars then, surely. But yeah, because there's the war between there was a war between the Daleks and the no, there was a war between the Carlids and the Thals. Then there was a war between the Thals and the Daleks. Then there was a war between the Daleks and the Movellans, and then there was the Time War. So in fact, they had 4 wars. Yes. Well, the Daleks and the Thals wasn't really a war, so that doesn't really count because it was just sort of like a bickering. Then the Daleks get destroyed on Skaro, and then there's more of them. So that was perhaps, and they say it's an earlier point in time. So that the episode with the Daleks invasion of Earth was actually before that. So it gets very confusing. Because when I see Genesis of the Daleks, I'm thinking, well, after this, they're going to go over to Skaro and they're going to do that stuff. Because there is no other way around it, you know. Davros created the Daleks in Genesis of the Daleks, and so that means that, you know, after that episode, the Daleks will go and invade. So that means that everything, all the stuff before Genesis of the Daleks is after Genesis of the Daleks in the timeline, if you know what I mean, you know. So all of their invasions happen after Genesis of the Daleks. So that's what's confusing. But then the Movellans, of course. I don't know what people think of the Movellans, but I think they're very good. I like their costumes and the way they're a bit bitchy. I mean, don't you just love that fight at the end with Romana and Commander Cheryl? And they're just like bitch fighting, you know. It's like a cat fight sort of thing. I love it. You know, when Commander Cheryl's a real bitch, it's like, oh, you bitch. And she just sort of whacks someone. And it would be brilliant if, you know, Commander Cheryl just slapped Romana. That would have been awesome. But they didn't do that. Yes, so then they have the war with the Movellans, and Davros has to come back and sort that out for them because they can't do it themselves. Davros is definitely used as a sort of pet of the Daleks, you know, because they just say, well, we don't want you now, but we will want you when we're in trouble. So that was a big thing about the Daleks. But Davros isn't the same, you know. In Genesis of the Daleks, he's a completely different person to the person he is in Innocence. When he was a kid, you know, he's different, but, you know, we don't see him. I think it was wrong for them to put Terry Malloy as Davros, because he can't play Davros. He can play Davros when he's in TV appearances as Davros, with the, you know, Davros mask, but he can't play Davros with his normal voice, you know. When he does Davros, you know, in the second episode of I, Davros, that's just awful. Sorry, put Rory back in, because Rory was good as Davros, and I thought I would have loved to have listened to his voice again in the second episode of I, Davros, and I don't watch it anymore because I thought, you know, put Rory in for the second. If I did put Rory Jennings in as Davros for the second time, I would have watched it again. But I don't like it because Terry does that awful voice, his normal voice, which is not good. When I'm watching that, I'm thinking, oh look, here's fat Terry Malloy doing a voice. Pathetic. He doesn't sound like Davros, he sounds like a bloke, and that's what we don't want. So, and then after that, there's the Time War, obviously, which I think, if they did do it, they would do it all wrong, of course. If the new series people wrote the Time War and they showed it, they'd do it all wrong. Firstly, you need Romana as president, right? Then you need Paul McGann, you need Chris Ferguson, you don't need David Tennant, of course, or Matt Smith, but you do need Romana, you need Lala Ward, and you need Paul McGann, and you need Chris Ferguson, and that's the way you could do it. You'd need Davros, but I prefer they had a somewhat younger Davros, you know, somewhat younger. They could do the Time War, yes. I think doing Gallifrey would be quite good with CGI, but it might not. It depends how you do it. I mean, you could either do it good or bad, and judging on what the classics, the new series have done already, I don't think they could do it, but they might be able to. I mean, they wouldn't obviously employ Lala Ward. No, they wouldn't, because they have this sort of weird idea. Oh, we don't want to bring them back. No, but I would, because it's set in stone now that Romana was the president of Gallifrey, quite rightly, and so you know, they could potentially bring back Leela, because she is on Gallifrey, but she probably died, you know. And Susan Caroline Ford, you can't bring her back. No, she's so old now. In appearance, people like Louise Jameson, she's not so old and she doesn't look that bad, and neither does Lala. Well, Lala Ward. I mean, I was just looking at my videos from my other channel, and people are saying Lala Ward, gosh, she's hot. Gosh, she's hot. Oh my God, she's so fit. And that was a video of her quite late on, you know, in a documentary. So she looked old, but, you know, people still think she's pretty attractive. So I have this policy. I don't think you should have. I don't find Perry, Leela, or any of those. I don't find them attractive. No, it's not because they're not sexy or anything. I can't do it. I cannot find people from Doctor Who attractive because this is a show I love, and no, I can't do that. No, it's against my will to watch that. I mean, it's like saying, well, you know, I like Lala from the Teletubbies, but it doesn't mean, you know, oh, she's hot, you know. Of course, Lala was a lesbian, of course, yes. Yes, Tinky Winky was gay, and Lala's a lesbian, yes. And the other two, well, they're just... I think Dipsy was bisexual, and who's the other one? Poe, he was just a little thing, yes. No, but Tinky Winky was gay because he had that. You know, first of all, he's the colour of gay pride. You know, he's purple, which is like the registered colour for, you know, gay people. That's not being homophobic or anything, but that's it's true. Is purple? You know, you think purple is sort of a gay colour. You know. Second of all, he has a handbag, and it's not a bag. It's not a magic bag. It's a handbag. It's a handbag. It literally is a handbag. And he, third of all, he dances around his handbag like a woman. If that doesn't shout out he's a queer, then I don't know what does. Lala is a lesbian because she just looks like a lesbian, really. I mean, she's got that face that looks like a lesbian, and you can just imagine her being a lesbian. Dipsy's bisexual because you kind of think, well, he goes for Lala, but he'd also have he'd have a nice bit of Tinky Winky. Lala and Dipsy aren't necessarily lesbian and bisexual, but I think Tinky Winky is definitely homosexual, I guess. That's very obvious. I mean, for a kid watching, no, it's not obvious to him, but it's obvious to us, grown-ups, that Tinky Winky is obviously gay, or queer, or something wrong with him. And Nunu, I think, is just sort of a sex deviant who just wants to, you know... Because have you seen it on YouTube? There's this clip of Nunu practically... putting his plunger on Poe's bits and sort of rubbing it like that's probably a parody clip or something. Yeah, it's obviously probably, but it's sort of like Poe being cleaned by Nunu. It's like the most dirty thing ever. Funny though. Yeah, type it on YouTube, it's there. Anyway, we stopped talking about Skaro now, so there we go. Yes, Genesis of the Daleks doesn't really fit into the story at all. I mean, they say that the last Eye Davros fits perfectly into just before Genesis starts. It doesn't, no. But I think Skaro is a fascinating planet with a fascinating history. And I've got an hour to upload this, so I won't do it at all. But anyway, there we go. Am my upload finished yet? My upload's complete, so there we go. Goodbye.